After weeks of silence after his mother's unexpected death, Michael Stone finally spoke out, and what he revealed changed everything. Official reports stated that Angie's death was a tragic accident related to her long-standing health issues, but Michael knew something wasn't right. They say that the truth always comes out, but nobody expected Angie Stone's own son to reveal something that would rock the entire music industry. Angie Stone was a legend, a powerhouse in soul and R&B, who had dedicated her life to fighting for her music, her legacy, and her family. She had built a career from the ground up, overcoming every obstacle the music industry threw at her. However, in her final days, some friends and family noticed that she was acting strangely, missing calls, canceling appearances, and even talking about feeling observed. According to those close to her, she had become paranoid and was always watching over her shoulder, as if something negative was going to happen. At first, everyone assumed it was simply stress or fatigue from years of fighting in the music business, but after her passing, those minor symptoms began to appear as warning signs that had been disregarded. The night before she died, Angie confided in Michael that she felt something terrible was coming and that powerful people in the industry wanted her silence because she had spent years speaking out about royalty theft, mistreatment of artists, and shady backroad deals that robbed her of millions of dollars. She had spent years speaking out about these issues, and just when she was ready to expose them all, she was gone. However, things didn't add up when Michael saw his mother's autopsy report, and the official cause of death was listed as a medical complication, which was easy to think given her history of high blood pressure and diabetes. But a glance at the toxicology report revealed otherwise. Not only were there deep tissue bruises on her arms, wrists, and even her neck, not the kind that resulted from a simple fall, but the kind that forensic experts say are consistent with someone being forcibly restrained. But there were also traces of sedatives and an unidentified compound in her bloodstream that Angie had never used and had no prescription for. Michael was aware of every medication his mother took and had been helping to manage her health for years. Michael's thoughts returned to his conversation with his mother in the final days before her death. Every time he spoke up, something happened. A contract vanished, a deal fell through, or I received a warning call telling me to keep quiet. At the time, he assumed she was simply venting about her difficulties in the industry, but now he wasn't sure. What if she wasn't just being paranoid? Genuinely quieted. The more Michael investigated the circumstances surrounding his mother's death, the more unsettling the information became. This wasn't just about one artist dying, it was about a larger pattern of artists being silenced for speaking out. When he attempted to get more information, things took a darker turn. Michael wasn't going to let this go. His mother had fought all her life, and now it was his turn to fight for her. He reached out to independent medical experts to review Angie's autopsy report, and what they discovered astounded him. The bruising patterns, the sedatives in her system, and the hours that were missing from her timeline. All of this indicated that Angie Stone's death was not a result of a sad medical emergency. Rather, it was not natural. Before Michael could share these results with the public, he discovered something even more concerning. The official reports were locked away, not merely closed, as though someone didn't want them to be reviewed. Michael came to the realization that this wasn't just about his mother's death, but also about controlling the narrative when he noticed that the media was oddly silent about Angie's death, with major news outlets hardly mentioning anything other than the first accidental death story. Michael refused to allow this case to be forgotten before anyone could begin to ask serious questions. He hired a private pathologist to perform a second autopsy, and the results were even more unsettling. The fresh examination verified his darkest suspicions. Angie's body displayed symptoms of ongoing stress and potential details of the suffocation that were entirely absent from the official report. According to the private pathologist, indicated that her breathing had been limited in a manner that was not consistent with natural causes. However, things become even more sinister from here. Michael began investigating who had access to Angie in her last hours. He examined hospital logs, surveillance footage, and phone data, but he discovered holes in the when. Michael asked the hospital for Angie's complete medical history. He was refused access, even though her son was present. It was almost as if someone was hiding their tracks, and then an anonymous source got in touch with him. Timeline surveillance cameras in the area had missing footage during crucial moments, and multiple calls from Angie's phone had been erased. Someone with great knowledge of the music business encouraged Michael to stop asking questions. saying that Angie had been playing a risky game and that people like her don't get away with it. It was obvious that this wasn't an accident. Michael was being cautioned to be quiet as well, since Angie Stone had turned into a threat to influential individuals. But this is where things take a startling turn. What that could explain everything and reveal everything was what Michael recalled his mother had been working on in the months before she passed away. A memoir that aimed to expose the music industry's most sinister secrets. Contract emails captured exchanges she had been gathering information on for years. In order to reveal, Michael was certain that his mother's death was not an accident because someone had silenced her before she could reveal the truth. However, when he looked through her belongings after her death, he found that the manuscript was gone. Entire chapters had been erased from her life laptop, and it appeared as though someone had gone through her files and removed the most dangerous parts of her story. The question was who stood to lose the most if Angie spoke out, and how far they would go to keep their secrets hidden. Now that his mother had been silenced, Michael wasn't just mourning, he was on a mission. It seemed like someone wanted him to keep quiet too, but he wasn't going to back down. He began contacting some of Angie's closest friends and industry insiders in the hopes of finding someone who was more knowledgeable about what she had discovered prior to her passing. And that's when he discovered something terrifying. Angie wasn't the only musician to deal with this kind of pressure. For years, influential people in the music business had been charged with theft of royalties. Angie had spent her whole career fighting against unjust contracts and hidden arrangements that defrauded her of the money she legitimately earned, blackballing artists and exploiting any who dared to speak up. However, this is where things get interesting because, according to one of her closest friends, she had proof. Angie had been preparing to provide evidence that millions of dollars had been embezzled from her and other black artists. She had emails, documents, and even audio recordings of executives confessing to unethical business practices. But she vanished just as she was about to do so. When Michael began to piece things together, he discovered that his mother had been pushed out of the spotlight on multiple occasions during her career. The moment she began speaking up, radio stations stopped playing her music, sponsors pulled out of her music tour, and deals that appeared to be solid abruptly vanished. This pattern had been observed by other vocal artists before her. Angie had repeatedly explained to Michael that the industry operated like a machine, and if you didn't follow its rules, they would shut you off. But Michael thought they had done worse, they had deleted her. The most bizarre aspect is that when Michael attempted to retrieve the lost files from his mother's laptop, he discovered an unexpected backup. When he plugged in the drive, which was concealed in one of Angie's old storage boxes, he discovered that it contained voice recordings, contra tracks, and a list of names of industry executives, producers, and even artists who had been involved in these backrow deals. This was what his mother had been trying to tell him, but before he could even comprehend what he had discovered, strange things began to happen. His calls were being dropped, emails were going missing from his inbox, and then he received a message from an unknown number. It was a brief but clear walk away, while you can still do that. At that point, Michael realized that he was not just solving a mystery any longer. He was entering a dangerous situation, and if he didn't handle it carefully, he could be the next person to go silent. Whoever in charge of this was strong, and he would need to be more intelligent than them if he wanted justice for his mother. Michael had discovered something much more significant than the death of his mother. He was now in possession of evidence that could rock the music industry as a whole. However, the closer he got to the truth, the more dangerous things became. He began to notice strange figures and cars following him near his apartment, and even his social media accounts were being hacked and tampered with. It was obvious that someone knew what he had discovered and wanted to stop him, but Michael had made up his mind that he wasn't going to back down. Now that it was his turn to go public, he reached out to journalists, bloggers, and independent media outlets, people who weren't controlled by the same powerful figures who had attempted to silence Angie. This is where it gets even more shocking. One by one, the people he reached out to began to withdraw. Some stopped returning his calls, while others told him outright that they had been warned to avoid this story. Renowned journalists even informed him, "You don't realize what you're up against. Michael, this isn't just about your mother. It's about a system that has been keeping artists silent for decades." Rather than give in to pressure, Michael chose to post a few files online that contained hints of the exploitation and corruption that went on behind the scenes. Suddenly, the story went viral, with fans, other artists, and activists demanding answers and people sharing their own accounts of being defrauded, threatened, and forced out of the business. Once more, Angie's name was popular, but this time it was because of the dark truth behind her death rather than her music. Then, a horrifying incident occurred. A garbled voice on the other end of a call that Michael got from a blocked number stated, "You think you're helping her, but you're only putting yourself in danger. Let it go before it's too late." Before the connection died, whoever was behind this wasn't just powerful, they were also observing, and Michael felt his heart racing. The most terrifying part, though, was when he returned to check the backup drive where he had kept all of Angie's files. It was completely erased. Someone had hacked into his system and removed all of the evidence, names, and recordings. At that point, Michael realized that he was up against people who could erase not only files but also lives, unless he could figure out a way to make the truth public. His mother's story and his might never be told. However, he had one last move that, if it succeeded, it would be the last blow to those who had spent years hiding in the shadows.